with David Carlson, and David and I have known each other for, we've known of each other, I'll rephrase that, for, I'm gonna say like 6 years or so, and we've never met in person. This is actually our first time meeting in person, and we got connected through Twitter originally, and probably had something to do with some sort of hashtagged communication or community on Twitter.
Yeah, and something Minnesota related.
Something Minnesota related.
Yeah.
And yeah, it seemed like a good idea to follow him at the time, so I just kept following him. And I wanted to bring him on today because he's done a couple of really cool things. One of them has to do with the New York Stock Exchange, which is part of one of my 21 questions for you.
All right.
which won't be, like, doesn't have to be a long answer. But yes, I just wanted to essentially, he's an author, and that essentially started off because he was a blogger before he became an author, and I think that process is really cool, and how you put that together and the amount of work and the amount of hours that I've got into it, it's a really cool development. So I wanted to have a little bit of a conversation about that as well.
Sure.
So thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. And we're gonna hop into 21 questions, and hopefully this goes over smoothly.
We'll see how it goes. I'm nervous.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Happy hour or conference?
Happy hour.
I thought you would say conference. I totally thought you would say that. Totally fine though.
Yeah, happy hour by a little bit.
Okay. In one word, being on the New York Stock Exchange for Cheddar was?
Interesting.
Wasn't expecting that either. What's your favorite color?
Blue.
Couldn't tell. Pet peeve?
Ooh, chewing with your mouth open.
How do you get your news?
Honestly, more and more on Twitter. It's really becoming like a news source, I feel like it's transitioning towards that.
Okay. Teacher or student?
Can I say neither? No. I guess I'll say teacher if I have to choose.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ideal lunch spot?
I mean, I usually eat lunch at my desk, so usually don't go out for lunch, but I guess if I had to pick, J. Selby's in St. Paul. It's a vegan restaurant.
Oh.
Just like a different, kind of a cool, different sort of vibe. I like the stuff that they're doing.
Okay,
so.
okay. Left or right?
Right.
Weekends are for?
Side hustles.
I knew you would say that. Guilty pleasure?
Reality television.
Ha! West or East Coast?
I haven't been to either that often, so I'll say East Coast, just because I've been there a couple more times. So.
Your favorite credit card?
Right now I'd say the Barclay card, Arrival, World MasterCard Elite. I know the name's ridiculous, but they have a really great sign-up bonus right now, so you can get some travel credits.
Nice.
So
very nice.
That's my choice right now.
Who would you trade jobs with for one day?
I think I'd say a travel reporter on the day that they're covering some beach somewhere. Because you're basically on vacation, but you're getting paid to do it, so.
True story. Ocean or lake?
I'll say lake just because we're from Minnesota. I don't mind the ocean though.
So original. So original. Favorite season?
I think fall.
Favorite TV show?
It changes for sure.
So current.
I watch a lot of TV. I'll say Survivor.
Still on.
That's like 80% of people will say that. The rest of them are watching every season. Yeah, it actually premieres tonight, the new season. Check it out.
right over my head.
Yeah, but I don't know, there's a lot of shows, but like I said, reality TV is my guilty pleasure. So.
Right. What time is your alarm set for?
5 a.m.
Nice.
Yep. I can't say I always get up at 5, but usually by about 5:30 I'm up, so.
You hop on a plane, where are you headed?
That's a tough one. My personality wants to ask like a bunch of details around, okay, how much money do I have for this? Like, how much time do I have? Someplace warm.
Okay.
Yeah.
What part of Minnesota did you grow up in?
East suburbs.
What's one personality you'd like to sit down and have a conversation with?
Probably Gary Vaynerchuk.
I knew you were going to say
you know
that.
well, yeah. I mean, you gotta say him if you listen to him and you're a fan of him. Just to be able to have a one-on-one conversation would be super valuable.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
You've been blogging for 5 to 7 years, and you ended up writing a book about what it means to put your head down and work hard to get out of debt.
Yeah.
And that comes with a lot of sacrifices. Also, thinking from a time frame standpoint, you weren't thinking short term, you were thinking long term. Mm-hmm. And so part one of my question is what have been the biggest advantages for you as far as researching and learning about ways to save money to make it work for you?
Yeah, I think being in the personal finance niche, I guess, and running a blog based on that, I think the reason it's so attractive, and you'll see, or at least I'll see, maybe like 5 or so new bloggers every single day who are trying to start a personal finance site. But your question's great because it really gets down to the core of it. You have more time and energy to put towards learning about personal finances. And even if your blog, if you quit after a year, quit after 6 months, or move away from that, you've gained a ton of knowledge that will apply to your life, that you can share with others, even if you're not, blogging about it or talking about it as your side hustle, I guess you could say. So I'd say the biggest benefit is just having that time to be able to learn more and more about it, and knowing that I can use that information and kind of pivot away from blogging if I choose to.
Part 2 is, what has been the feedback from people that have taken on the advice that you've given them from, because you tweet about it a lot, mm-hmm. and I'm just simply curious on the feedback of that.
Yeah, I think the feedback, and part of it too is you can see what sort of topics kind of resonate with people. Mm-hmm. So what I've noticed recently is, that's totally fine. What I've noticed recently is a lot of people like practical advice. So mm-hmm. tell me a specific way to improve my finances, or give me a specific takeaway. So like I said, there's a ton of personal finance blogs out there, and there's always new people coming in. So what can set any given one apart? And I think that's really focusing on the value you provide. Mm-hmm. So for me, I guess a really tangible example is you can tell someone to budget, and you can even kind of give high level how to do it. But on my site, one thing that I did was I built an actual budget spreadsheet that people can download, mm-hmm. and it's linked up with another great company called Tiller, who kind of takes all your financial information and puts in a really uniform format. So readers who download that spreadsheet, they can use Tiller to kind of pull in their data and actually create a budget. And then going further, okay, so you budget, what do you actually do with that? So right. Like I might write a post about, or I have written a post of, okay, now that you have started a budget, how do you find money in your budget? So working within what you're already spending. So finding those tangible ways to actually do things is important. And going back to my book, one thing that I really focus on is when people are already graduated from college. So the demographic of 21 plus. So people who have already incurred student loan debt. I saw a lot of bloggers out there who have published posts about how not to get into debt. And I can guarantee you there's almost no high school students reading their site. And maybe it's helpful for parents, but I'd also say their audience is a bit younger, and the way they write the posts is really targeted towards the reader as if they're going to college. So keeping things like that in mind of, okay, that's not value added for a typical, 20-something, 30-something, so what is valuable? Specific ways to actually tackle that debt. And that's kind of really what I've been focusing on the past few years in particular.
I have used one of your spreadsheets, but not necessarily for money, but for other things.
Well, there's a few out there. There's a time tracking spreadsheet. Actually, I can't think of all of them that are out there, the non-finance one, but there's a few of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
You give a lot away, a lot of free knowledge away. I mean, but that's kind of, I mean, I think it's kind of nice in a way. It helps people understand, oh, hey, like, this is maybe someone that I should be following because they clearly know what they're doing. And
yeah, and that's definitely the model right now for bloggers. A lot of freebies in exchange for email addresses.
Yes.
So some people will download it and they'll get the first, like, I send out typically like weekly or bi-weekly emails. I've been kind of experimenting with that. And they might unsubscribe right away, but some people stick around. So as long as your list is going up, then you're doing something right.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. You wrote a book called Hustle Away Debt, and it began in the form of blogging, which is why I even brought it up as the first question. Did you make a commitment to write once a week for a period of time, knowing that you had this knowledge to offer your audience?
So I should give you a bit of a backstory. I did some political blogging in college, so before the whole personal finance thing.
Okay.
And I worked part-time, kind of as like a side gig, I guess, in college for a personal finance blog, and that kind of opened my eyes to blogging as a business. And the guy who I worked for, he's actually built up kind of an empire of 50 plus like money-focused sites. So he acquires blogs and he's building this huge network. Really business savvy person, so learned a lot from him. And I decided before I was going to start Young Adult Money, I gave myself over a year to actually decide to start it. So I didn't dive into it because I didn't want to quit it, because I knew that blogging is essentially a grind, especially in the beginning, because you can spend 2-3 years of really consistent effort and literally get nowhere.
Yes.
So a lot of people actually quit after maybe 3 to 6 months, and I want to stick with it, long term. So at least a year I wanted to really commit to that. And I was actually writing probably 5 posts a week at the beginning, and it was just me writing. So I was pretty motivated when I started, but I think that context is important, because I think if other people try to do that for the most part and didn't really plan for it, they'd probably burn out pretty quickly. But I stuck with it, and now I obviously have a few other writers on the site.
Yes.
Right now I have 2. I'm looking to hire a couple more. Really always looking to hire, because writers come and go. But yeah, so that was my plan, was to stick with it for at least a year and see where it went.
Okay. How can people link from the perspective of the job description of...
Oh, it's for writers. Yeah, it's youngadultmoney.com/writers wanted.
Okay. Do you perceive our generation scoffing at the idea of retirement? Because I feel like there's a disconnect with the word retirement and the trust of what that even means at this point. And I just want to... What's your point of view on that?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people in their 20s and even 30s, they either haven't started saving for retirement or they've saved very little. And I think, at least for our generation right now, if you really look at the data out there, what are the issues? I know I talk about this a lot, but student loan debt, that's a huge drag on a big portion of the population on their finances. Let's say you and your partner, or just you, have like $1,000 a month payment. That's basically a mortgage payment right there.
Yes.
That's $1,000 that could be going towards retirement. So I think that, as well as other personal finance issues like credit card debt, not making enough money to break that paycheck to paycheck cycle. I think a lot of people are stuck in that. Wages haven't really kept up with the cost of living and the cost of, housing and everything like that. So you have a whole generation of people, even if you get an entry-level job, it's not necessarily helping you dig yourself out of debt. So I think that's why people don't really think about retirement. If they do, maybe they are saving, but it's a very abstract thing because it's so far away. I think for people who are maybe in a different generation and in a better spot financially, maybe they have like $1 million in a retirement account. Yeah, it's something that they can really tangibly feel. maybe they're 20 years or less away from it, yeah, it's something that's real, something that they're thinking about. But some in their 20s and 30s, they might just be trying to find out, what do I want to do with my career? What do I want to do for a living? So they have trouble thinking about retirement or not working, I guess, which is what a lot of people think of retirement as, but I think that's also changing a bit too. And I think you alluded a bit to that in your question. So.
I keep hearing people talk about how, oh, I'm going to work till I'm 80, if they live to be that long, because they love what they're doing so much. But that's, for some of us, that's 45 years away. And it's like, I hope you still like what you're doing. Because I think that what happens is you can truly enjoy your job and what you're doing, but say your interests shift and they change, like taking that, it's just, that's why I asked, because I think that some people don't process what the word retirement means or what it could mean for them.
Yeah.
I know one person that is based out of Southern California. He'll literally he'll retire every quarter. He'll take 3 weeks and he'll travel with his family. But his job and the lifestyle that he's built for himself allows him to be able to do that. And I read a lot about how a third of us, of people our age, we don't even have a retirement built up. So that's why I kind of that's why I wanted to ask you that question, because I read it and I'm just like, that's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think a better thing to shoot for is just to have the option to choose what sort of work you want to do if you were to work in retirement, because I think a lot of people do actually enjoy doing something with their time.
Yeah.
And it might be working, it might be volunteering, it might be something different, but it kind of depends on finances for one thing. So I think shooting for being able to have that flexibility, I think that's something that a lot of people in their 20s and 30s, they kind of idolize right now because it just sounds so great to be able to choose to not work in a corporation or to, test something out that might not bring in any income for a year or two.
Right.
But it's really tough to get to that point.
It is. There's so many moving puzzle pieces. I could talk about this to you for probably like 2 hours before I'd finally be like, I'm exhausted thinking about this. Because
there's a lot that goes into it.
There's so much. All right, let's move on and let's switch gears to talk about the kitty cats. even though they're not kitty cats, but you do have cats. They're quite cuddly, and I see this on Instagram. I promise I don't stalk you. I just happen to see them when you post. And so is there one shelter in town that you are that you had your eyes on when you were looking to adopt animals?
Yeah, in the Twin Cities, one of the biggest shelters around here is the Humane Society.
Yes.
So that's where we got our cats, and I definitely am a big fan of them. We donate to them regularly. I think they're doing important work.
For sure.
I wish I could give more money, but other priorities right now.
Yeah, totally get it.
But yeah, I definitely would recommend people go there to adopt.
What are their names?
Chester and Tucker.
Very cute.
Yeah.
Very cute. So my next question is pretty simple, and I think I know what your answer is going to be, but podcast or radio?
And actually, you might be surprised at my answer. I'm going to say both and neither at the same time. So I listen to podcasts a lot, I'd say probably the past year, like pretty deep into it, and listen to like Ask Gary Vee, who he puts out content like constantly, so it's hard to keep up with, and then you got all the archives and whatnot. A lot of personal finance podcasts like Stacking Benjamins and Shannon McClay of Financially Blonde, Martinis and Money podcast, which is pretty popular. Yeah.
That sounds fun.
Yep, it is fun. So she'll ask you what you're drinking when you start the podcast, which is
awesome.
Which is interesting, and yeah, no, that's good. And she has a startup out in New York City that I visited out there. So she's done a lot of stuff. Has her hand in a lot of things. But anyway, I listen to a lot of those. And I used to pretty regularly, and I've actually kind of taken a pause, especially with Gary Vaynerchuk. We keep bringing him up, and people are probably getting sick of hearing about him. But he puts out a lot of content, and he's really speaking towards entrepreneurs, or just, I'd say in general, people who have like some sort of passion project or something that they know they want to try or something they know that they want to do. And a lot of people just don't ever actually do anything. So for me, with him, like I bought his book, Ask Gary Vee. I read a couple chapters, and I think for a lot of people, they need to just shut it off for a while. You know what you need to do, and that's just a distraction. It's taking up your time. So I've actually stopped listening to podcasts for the time being, and more so I listen to like background noise, usually like familiar bands that I've listened to a million times, but just something that'll play in the background so I can focus.
Yes.
But yeah, that's my answer. It might be surprising. I like podcasts, but currently I'm on hiatus from listening to them.
Sometimes you need to be, and I try not to speak to it because people talk about it so much, but to your point with Gary, it's the thing is you can romanticize it as much as you want. And I recently went to a meetup when he was here in town, and
I was pissed that I missed that.
And
so that'd have been cool to go to.
And in line, before we started recording this today, I was telling David about how, sorry, I didn't mean to like look at you. I was telling him about how when you ask questions, you need to figure out how to focus the question to make it specific so you're not asking such a broad question. And so I asked probably 3 or 4 people in line that were waiting to get their obligatory selfie with him. I said, what is the reason for why you follow him?
That's a good question.
They could not give me an answer. They were just like, he's Gary Vee. And I'm like,
yeah.
what does that mean? And they just stood there and they froze. And I was like, that's the problem.
Yeah.
You've idolized and you haven't been able to pinpoint. And I think a lot of people get stuck on that because they see someone doing something super successful and they romanticize that idea of it, but they're not actually executing and doing their own thing and doing their own thing. And that's one reason I started these is because I wanted to figure out, I've found out that I'm a relationship builder, and that's why I've been doing these. So there's an end goal to it, at least I think there is. It kind of keeps shifting, but yeah, when I was standing in line, I was just like, seriously, like, why are these people here? And
I think he both loves it and hates it. He has said that he wants to put himself out of business.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't want people to buy his books or listen to his content because he wants them to be doing the projects and the things that he's trying to motivate them to actually do.
Yeah.
But I think he also, obviously, like anyone in his position, would enjoy having that sort of influence and ability to speak to that focus of an audience. So yeah,
it's all about, at the end of the day, it's all about giving yourself permission to try things, and a lot of people are afraid to because when you try to start something, you feel like you're getting judged. I feel judged all the time doing this. I mean,
you will be judged.
Yeah, no matter what, you're not gonna be friends with everybody, and I think that's okay. And if you can recognize that, so yeah. Wow, way off. Such a tangent right there. I felt like I needed to say that though, because I think that some people, they don't connect the 2 dots. It's kind of like why I asked the whole retirement question. It's the same exact concept. So yeah. Okay, so let's get back to the interview. Oh my goodness. You work in finance, and you studied it in college as well, so you're actually one of the 20% that's actually doing what you went to college for.
For the most part.
For the most part. I would assume
I do still work in corporate finance.
Yes. And then your wife, she got her master's degree, so you guys were
she's just about done. In May.
So that's kind of a lot of debt to take on, but I think you guys had a plan for how that was gonna.
Well, I think we had a plan after we incurred the debt, which is why I say that I focus so much on people that incurred it. Because if you think about people who, not to cut into your question, but if you think about people who incur debt in college, or take yourself to somebody who's a junior or senior in college, and then their parents. So that junior or senior, they're not thinking about the financials behind college, or at least probably I'd say 95% plus, and that might even be conservative. They're not thinking about the finances, because you can get financing, which is why there's so much student loan debt in the United States. Just from an economics perspective, you can get access to it. You're just going to pursue at the time what you think the best decision is. And if you think about parents, and this is where I hope that millennial parents might be able to actually change the course of student loans. Parents, they're not going to say no to their children because it's such an emotional decision. They're not taking the finances into consideration for their children too. They should know that their children probably aren't thinking about that aspect of it, but they also don't want to say no, and they don't want to make a stressful situation more stressful for their kids. So they kind of go along with it. They help out as much as they can. But the reality of it is, to your point of only 20% of people doing what they went to college for, your passions and your pursuits change. And especially for somebody who's entrepreneurial, they might start in corporate or they might start working for some sort of business, but eventually they might want to leave that. So the next step is really getting rid of that debt and then kind of testing out different ideas, trying to get to that point where they're able to financially take that leap.
I get it.
Yeah.
It's also the practicality of it. Because when I went off to college, I didn't think I had another choice.
True, and I actually don't think that trend's going to change. I think there's still so many jobs where they're going to look for somebody with an undergrad degree. And so many different job functions. So you look at marketing, finance, accounting, operation, really like anything at most companies, they're going to require that degree. So I don't think that trend's going to change. I think coding is one of the few areas where people can kind of break in if they're a really talented coder. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens.
So, to kind of like keep going with the question, totally finding one off because I do that all the time. Sidetracked, it's like, whoa, squirrel.
It's important though. Some of the things.
Yeah, it's very
sometimes.
Yeah.
Not all tangents are. Try to keep it relevant.
So, like I said, you worked in college. You worked in college. Oh my!
I did work in college.
I hope you're working in college because otherwise, how the heck are
some
you gonna?
People don't. But
oh my goodness!
Yeah.
That's a whole other topic. Man, we've got off on like 5 tangents so far. This is awesome. Essentially, you had to find a way to pay off the bills because obviously, you know, when the bills are coming in, you need to pay them, right? So how did your blog naturally become that second source?
It did, and I think you give me too much credit. We didn't actually have a plan prior to graduating college. We did date in college, we got engaged, we got married soon after college. But then as far as the whole financial thing, it was more so the reality of our student loan payment was $1,000 a month. So once you start paying that it's 2 people, so to make it comparable, like $500 per person. Once you start paying that, depends on your personality. Like for me, there's a lot of things I want to do, and it was more so a challenge of how can I create a stream of income that is at least $1,000 a month to offset this, so it's like I don't have that student loan debt, in theory. At least kind of like making a challenge or a game out of it. And that kind of led down the whole path of the blog, and naturally what I focus on is side hustles and how to make money outside your 9 to 5, because more and more people are looking for that. And I think it doesn't always go back to debt. A lot of times it does, because a lot of people need some motivation to get going, and I think debt can be a great motivator if you want to put some positive spin on it. You'll work harder if you're in debt because you kind of see the benefits of that more directly.
I think it depends on who you're talking about.
That's true. It does depend on who you're talking about, but for some people, that can kind of give them the kick in the pants that they need to actually test out a side hustle, or maybe there's some business that they always wanted to test out, and it's like, hey, the upside is it could maybe eliminate my student loans, or it could, well, it kind of starts with that, but then could maybe become my full-time job. Maybe I don't have to, work at a corporation the rest of my life. I can pursue this passion and kind of own it and decide how best to run it and go forward with it. So I'd say that's actually the approach I took. Is I'm entrepreneurial. I don't see myself doing corporate finance the rest of my life. So the debt is kind of a motivator and kind of gave me that motivation to pursue a few things and maybe more so stick with a few things, which I think is maybe more important than the motivation to start, because it's easy to start things, but it's tough to stick with them for the long haul. So the debt has helped with that, but also for anybody that's entrepreneurial, being able to test out different ideas and kind of learn without the pressure of this is my sole income. So for some bloggers that I know, they've gone that route where they now are making their full-time income from blogs, from sponsorships, stuff like that. I think the advantage someone like me, or really anybody doing a business as a side hustle or a blog in this case, the advantage is you might get to a point where you don't really need that side income, which I think I've gotten to, where I can break even and I can test out a bunch of different things and I don't have the pressure of I need to, you know, take on any offer that comes my way. I'm able to maybe say no to a few advertisers and increase my rates because I don't have to take every advertiser that comes my way.
And that's nice. Some people they have to figure out how to even get to the point of getting the advertisers versus you're on the other side of the fence now. And that's the side of the fence
and to go back to your intro, it has been over 6 years of, you know, pretty consistent work, so.
And if no one's gonna stick with it past 6 months, then like just forget about it.
Yeah, I'd say the first year don't expect to make anything. Not that that's always the case, but I think that's a really great mindset to go into it with. This is gonna be a ton of work, but I'm probably not gonna make anything, and down the road I might be able to turn into something profitable. But it's a good mindset to go in with.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. We kind of touched on this a little bit with the tangent that well, maybe I went off on. What's one thing that you expect to see happen with our generation from an economic standpoint of whether or not it's going to be, you know, too late to begin saving for retirement? Because I think I said earlier, a third of our generation, like we don't even understand the process of how to even make that a reality.
Yeah, I think as far as economic trends, we did already talk about it a little bit as far as student loans.
Yes.
I'm thinking, or I'm hoping I should say, I'm not thinking it'll play out this way, but I'm hoping that people who have incurred a lot of student loans might be able to influence their children or take that risk, because it is a risk, and that's why I think parents aren't stepping in and saying, hey, I know that you can get into some really great schools, but what if you went to a community college for 2 years? Because there's a lot of people in the workforce, and well, there's a few people in the workforce, and I think it'll be a growing trend of they went to community college for 2 years and then they transferred into some other school, and by the time they get to the workforce, or even when they graduate, it doesn't really matter where they started. It just matters that they got the degree from that college, from that specific college that they transferred into. So I think that's one trend that we'll see a lot more of, just because I think people who dig themselves out of student loan debt are going to want that for their children. They're going to want their children to not be in debt and have to go through that. And yeah, I think that'll be one of the trends that we see. Trying to think of what else. Obviously with the gig economy, I think that's just going to grow over time, and I think more and more people are going to find ways to leverage technology to build a brand and to offer value to companies. And I think a lot of companies are going to become smaller. There's going to be a lot more self-employed people who are employing each other too. And I think that trend's going to really increase. So that plays into retirement too, because then you got to set aside money yourself versus you're not having your employer match you. Your health insurance is more expensive. Your taxes are potentially higher. There's just a lot that goes into that. So hopefully that can be a positive trend. I think a lot of that comes down to people who go that route being confident in the rates that they charge. And realizing what the true cost of living is and what they have to factor into what they charge. So that's going to be a really big thing the next probably 10 years.
I was gonna say it's gotta be like a bigger number, and
Yeah.
I think that some people they don't understand. Okay, if I am making this much, they don't lay out a financial plan. They think it through in their head, and they don't actually write down the numbers. And I think that a gal that I follow, her name is Kayla Hollitz. I think I'm pronouncing her last name correctly. I'm interviewing her in a couple of weeks. And she'll tweet out a bunch about how take a look at your finances every single month, because otherwise the numbers are going to scare you, and if the numbers are scaring you, then you're not going to want to touch it, right? It's kind of like if you don't know how to handle we'll just use a snake as an example. If you don't know how to handle that animal, then you're going to be afraid of it. But if you know how to handle it, then you're gonna keep going and approaching it and figuring out how to become comfortable with that relationship. And I think for some people, money is just, they let it control them when it should be the other way around. And I think that's why I wanted to ask this question about the idea of like crap, retirement, like don't even want to go there. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think with finances, it's a lot like, you know, physical health and other aspects of health, where you can always learn more and there's always more that you can do. You don't have to spend, 60 hours a week focused on it. It's the same with fitness though. You don't need to know like everything about nutrition, every exercise. You're not a trainer necessarily.
Yeah.
You can spend a little bit of time on it and get big results, but you can spend more time if you want to.
Yeah.
If you're interested in that, going down that road. With finances, especially the first, hour or two that you put into each week, that you dedicate towards it, you get huge returns from just spending that time and being in the know of your finances, having them organized, making plans like you said, looking for opportunities to either cut costs or make extra money. And this goes even further about like tax hacks, which are kind of popular right now. How can you save money on taxes? Because if you can save $1,000 on taxes by leveraging like an HSA or something that protects your finances from taxes, then you're basically making $1,000. And most people don't get that far, but you kind of like start going down that road and you see all these little opportunities, and it doesn't take a ton of time to actually get a base understanding of your finances and start making some of those moves.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So much. Oh my gosh. It's like I always see this giant pool of economic topics, and I want to dive in, and I'm like, where do I even start? That for me, that's my visualization. For anybody who's wondering how maybe I'm visualizing, because that's what it is for me. And that's why I wanted to sit down and talk to you about it, because I was like,
Well, I think definitely the first thing you can do, and I say this before even budgeting. I actually just wrote a post that's going up. It'll probably be up by the time this video is up, but it's a personal finance checklist. Like just a list of things to do just to get started. The first one before even budgeting, tracking your spending. I don't recommend that people budget right out of the gate, because how can you budget if you don't know how much you're spending on each category? So figure out how much you're spending for maybe 1, 2, or 3 months, and just have it laid out. Then you know by category generally what you spend, and then make a budget and start challenging yourself what areas do you want to cut back in.
For sure.
So first step is just track your expenses, and it kind of goes from there.
Yeah. Like when you walk into Target, I'm one of those people that doesn't walk out $100 later. I walk out with exactly what I need, even though I see something shiny and pretty and ooh, it's fluffy and it's purple, and I'm like, hey, I need that. Wait, no, I don't.
Well, you must make a list then before you go in, because that seems like...
Not always.
But you know what you're going in there for.
I know what I'm going in there for.
That's what you got to do if you hope to step out of there with just that.
Yeah, because I'll go to the dollar rack area, but if someone's birthday's coming up and I'm trying to think of something fun to gift them, so that's the only reason I would maybe divert. Sure. So yeah. Otherwise, I'm one of those people that just I don't understand how people can't walk out with exactly only what they need, and that's a whole other subject. So my next question is very simple. Who are your mentors?
Yeah, and actually that question I think is kind of difficult, because I think at least I kind of compartmentalize my mentors. So I have a mentor at my 9-to-5 in corporate finance who I meet with once a month and get kind of career advice, and he knows about the other stuff that I kind of spend my spare time doing. and sheds his wisdom on that.
Okay.
So definitely he's a mentor. And then I'd say from like a Christianity, religion aspect, I definitely think I have a pastor friend who's a mentor. But the one thing that I don't have, this question makes me think about it, is kind of, like as far as small business and kind of the things that I want to work on from an entrepreneurship perspective. I don't have a mentor, but this kind of goes back to the whole Gary Vaynerchuk thing.
I was waiting for you to say it. I was waiting for it.
Because, I stopped listening to podcasts just for time because there's so much going on in my mind, so much that I want to work on. It really comes down to time. Like, I don't have enough time to accomplish everything I want to. So I think having a mentor is good, and I definitely advocate, especially if you're in a 9-to-5, for sure, because you can carve out part of your time there to spend with your mentor, and they obviously can kind of guide you through any issues or questions that you have about your career. But as far as the small business stuff, if you know what you need to do or what's on your plate that you prioritize, spend the time doing that. Might be more beneficial for some people than meeting with a mentor. I think if you have kind of an established business and you're spending all your time on it, then maybe carving out some time to bounce ideas off of somebody who's been there, done that, or just to like tap into their network, I think that's good. But for me, I'm not meeting with someone on that sort of stuff at this point.
Okay.
Kind of a long-winded answer to what you thought was a simple question.
Everyone is actually, one person has said that they're looking for their mentor currently because they don't really have one right now. Mm-hmm. But everyone else is listed anywhere from 5 to like 12 people. So
that's quite a few.
Yeah.
I think limiting it actually can be helpful.
It can be, but it also depends on where you're at and what you're focused on.
It depends on what you define a mentor as too, because for some people it's more so business partners, I'd almost say, or they're trying to build a relationship where they can work on a business with them, which I think a bit differently. I think of a mentor as a bit differently as just someone who's gonna, shed wisdom onto you, and I guess give you guidance versus someone that I'm gonna actually work with down the road. So.
And for some people, it's not even business related. It's professional development of how you approach conversations.
Sure. And
being able to get better with that, because there's some conversations where I would have no idea how to approach the conversation. I actually just had one recently via email, and I didn't know how to
respond.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can happen, definitely.
Yeah.
I think you need someone to bounce ideas off of. I think that's good.
You do. Yeah. If you could trade jobs with anybody for one day, who would it be?
Well, kind of my funny answer is the one I gave, a travel writer who's, like in the Caribbean or something, someplace warm where they are doing research for their post. I guess the other one that I would think of is probably somebody who has built a business kind of from nothing into something huge. Mark Zuckerberg's kind of like the cliche answer, but it could be really anybody who's, started from nothing, because I think I want to be able to relate to someone like that one day. I want to build something that I basically started from nothing into something bigger. So I think just getting into their heads for a day and seeing kind of what their day-to-day looks like down the road, and the kind of decisions that they have to make and how their teams and their resources are leveraged to advance their business. I think that would be really interesting.
I agree. It literally just occurred to me as you were answering the question. I think I've only been asking it to males. I haven't asked a female this question yet. And so the answer for males has been male-related personalities. So maybe I need to switch that up.
We'll see. Just be curious to see what
literally just occurred to me. Because Ryan Penny, who I interviewed on Monday, he said he would love to get in the mind of Elon Musk.
Yeah, I didn't even think of him, but that would be really interesting.
Yeah,
for sure.
And then
I want to learn from someone who doesn't share all that. And I think with a lot of businesses, people aren't sharing, you know, kind of the boring side of it or the side of it that doesn't make for good content or interview, you know, interview content or whatnot.
Because the boring stuff is all logistics.
Yeah, it is.
I almost did a snap today of the process that it takes to get these set up.
But people would be interested in seeing it, actually.
But it's boring. And they're like, oh, that's all you do? And I'm like, yeah, wait until you actually do it. And you have to do it over and over and over. Because I don't, side note, I have to take this set down every single time and I have to put it back up every single time. So it is boring. It's boring. But it's what I need to do. Because where else am I going to go for these? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, people don't always think about the whole process,
the whole
and everything
process,
behind
the picture.
it. Yeah, or the teams of people that kind of, you know, the really well-known people they have, teams of people that, you know, are doing a lot of the background work for them, and you don't see that work. And
they can afford those overhead costs, and I have decided to not even like make that part of my finances. So I'd have to rent a place for a space for probably, I don't know, $300, $500 a month. I'm assuming. I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it depends on the space, and I want it to be a convenient location for people too. So, a lot of logistics to think about. Again, it's boring, but yeah.
Yeah, well, with the blog too, I think some of that stuff gets lost on people, especially once your blog has scaled. So one thing, I don't know if you know this or not, but when you send out your, well, you probably know this, when you send out email marketing, you have to have an address on there. So if you're sending out blog emails, most people don't want to put their home address, so there's an expense, the P.O. box that you're renting, the email marketing client that you're using, which are way too expensive in my opinion, but writer fees, the hosting fees. If you're not a graphic designer, I'm not a graphic designer, I have a graphic designer, there's costs there, you know, every single month. So you can really build up things that don't seem like they cost much, they end up costing a lot. And when you look at the people who have it really built up, they're spending like hundreds of thousands on these things. So
I don't think people think about that.
Until you've actually like dove in and actually started to do those things.
Which is why I think a lot of people don't execute.
Yeah, or they quit because up front you can either do the work yourself or you can outsource it. It's good to actually go through the process of, you know, going the DIY route, especially with a blog or something that you're not sure what it's going to turn into, or that you want to make money on, because every dollar that you put out there is a dollar that you could have kept. So it's interesting stuff. I get interested in that sort of, you know, logistical background stuff. But
I know someone that's doing a podcast right now. I won't plug it because I've already plugged it a million times, but and he knows I've plugged it, but he's doing a podcast with a friend of his, and they've been doing it for a year now, and they've lost money on it, but they'll eventually make money on it.
Which isn't surprising at all for me.
Yeah.
Because podcasts seem just like blogs, except for me it sounds more time consuming.
It is.
Because I'm a writer, and you can kind of do that on your own time, and you don't have to worry about technology. Editing is much easier.
I mean, it's all the things.
Yeah, it's everything kind of thrown together.
Yeah, I know it's an overused and abused phrase, but it's very true. It's all the things of the logistics and the stuff that no one wants to talk about, because it's no fun. But it's fun once it starts, like, once something starts coming from it. What does self-awareness mean to you?
That's a tough question.
That's why I'm asking
it. So self-awareness, just at its base, is knowing yourself, I'd say.
Oh, for sure.
Knowing your strengths, your weaknesses, and even I'd say getting to know your strengths and weaknesses, and being able to accept your limitations, definitely. And I don't think it's necessarily saying you can't do that. I think some corporate cultures and some people, when they think of stuff like this, or they talk about, you know, focus on your strengths or improve your weaknesses. I mean, there's just every different mindset and opinions out there. I think sometimes they think of not doing the things that you're not strong at. But I think of self-awareness as being recognizing what your strong suits are and aren't, but also recognizing what you care about, because give me a mediocre writer who is super passionate about something and super passionate about, the quality of their content and what they're putting out there and providing value. Give me someone like that versus someone who is super skilled, super just really like has those base skills of a writer, but doesn't care about what they're writing about, does the minimum, isn't passionate about it, they're just kind of going through the motions, or they don't even want to do it, they're trying to move away from it. I'll take the mediocre writer every time. So I think being self-aware is also not just recognizing your strengths and weaknesses, but also what do you care about? What are you trying to accomplish? What are you working towards? You don't always have to have a definitive answer, but I think being aware of that is good. And I'll just say it, I'm not the strongest speaker, but I want to do that sort of stuff because it helps my brand, it helps my blog, it helps promote my book, and it gives me a platform to actually talk about, like student loan debt, which we've talked about a few times on here, and your podcast isn't even focused on, specifically personal finances, but I think having a platform to speak about that's important. So I've chosen to pursue those things, but someone else might say, I hate public speaking so much that I'm not even going to do it. And they might actually have more energy and be able to accomplish more by saying no to all the public speaking opportunities. So I think that's self-awareness in a nutshell. Just being aware of what you care about, what you're strong at, and how you're going to use that to pursue your passions.
I would agree.
I'm sure you get different answers depending who you ask, because it's definitely a tough question to answer.
It's very tough, but I like to talk about it because I figured out my self-awareness. It took me forever, but I finally nailed it.
Some people never find it.
Some people never do.
I think it's a good thing to think about.
And I think it depends on who you're surrounding yourself by, the communities of which you are taking the time to immerse yourself into, and that's where I figured it out, was the community that I was immersing myself into at the time. And I remember exactly where I was, I remember exactly how I felt, I remember the weather and everything of when everything hit me. And it changed everything. And I created a life acronym based off of that.
Yeah, that's pretty dramatic.
it's dramatic, and it's
to have happened.
Yeah, and I also wasn't expecting it. I was in Southern California when it happened, and I was not even. It was just another morning, and it was 5:15, and It was a moment where I saw something happen, and I could have missed it. It was only a 2-second moment, and I could have missed it completely.
And would you say going through that, just going back to my definition, is a kind of a line where you kind of know what your passion is, or at least like the direction that you want to go towards, or how would you kind of think about that?
So it goes back to the question, the thing I mentioned earlier with the Gary Vee and standing in line and asking people, why do you follow this person? Why do you follow who you follow? Because a lot of people idolize, and I think that's super, super unhealthy. Personal opinion. I think that you need to figure out why you are attracted to that person so much. What makes you gravitate towards them? Do the values that you've grown up with align with that? Or did you have a moment in life where you were questioning everything of the way that you were raised, and everything switched for you one day, so you kind of went off and did your own thing? And then, I mean, for me, I had to fly like technically halfway across the country for this thing to happen. For someone, it could happen in their backyard. So I think it goes back to why do you put your time and energy into the people and the things that you put the energy to? Why do you give it? Yeah,
that's definitely like the second layer that most people don't go to.
Yeah,
like the Gary Vee question. I think that might have changed the course of some of those people's lives, because unless you really think about like, why am I doing this, you're not processing everything in your background. And my wife's a psychology major, master, so maybe I've been exposed a little too much to the psychological side of things, but just really reflecting on that. And even, I think a lot of people don't reflect on how their upbringing impacts their life, or like really, how did it impact your life?
Yeah.
I think if you really think about that, most people, that's probably the number one thing that dictate the course of their life, and they might not even notice that that's why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I went super deep there.
That's good stuff.
But without getting too personal, obviously. But
maybe the next podcast.
Maybe.
Just share a little bit more each time.
But yeah, it's and I was just curious to know your answer to that question, because just the things that you've been focusing on, and I figured you would have a rather developed answer. So, and because I'm all about development and obviously personal development too. And if people haven't been catching on, well, they'll start catching it now because I've said it out loud on camera.
Yeah, and I think the more things you try and the more you push yourself out of your comfort zone, you'll recognize, you'll become more self-aware. Yeah. And it doesn't always feel like a positive thing. It might be, wow, I really hate doing that, but I feel like I should enjoy, well, like let's just take this for an example. Someone might realize they really hate speaking, public speaking. Like, it wasn't just they need to be out of their comfort zone. It's, no, I was really made, to write, to maybe be behind the scenes or do some of that logistical type stuff. But until you've actually, tried it, you're going to have trouble being aware enough to make those decisions.
Yeah. We went way deeper than I thought we were going to go with this. Well, thank you. This was fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I learned a lot, and I hope that you guys are able to take away one, if not a few things from this.
Hopefully at least one.
Hopefully at least one, my goodness. And I'll plug David's information in, and if you have any questions for him, you can probably reach him on Twitter pretty easily. You're a very quick responder on there, which is fantastic. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys, well, I'll see you guys next time. I know that much for sure.
I don't think I'll be here.